was thinking it was going to be like a. Sorry for that start. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Brian Kite. I'm the Dean and Vice Provost of Graduate Education and a professor of theater here at UCLA. And on behalf of all of us here at UCLA, which is a land-grant institution, we'd like to start this event by acknowledging the Gabrielina Tongva peoples as the traditional land caretakers of Tavangar, the Los Angeles Basin, and South Channel Islands. Well, I am honored to welcome you to UCLA Connect's Bruin Talks. It's nice to have you here. You can applaud there, I think. It said wait for applause, so if I didn't wait, we could have just waited. Los Angeles, it's a city with creation at its heart. Here is where kids grow up with symphonies at Disney Hall, murals that tell stories across Boyle Heights, where you can hike Griffith in the morning, enjoy Venice Beach by noon, and eat dumplings in the San Gabriel Valley at night. It's where dreamers from around the world find a home and a voice. Los Angeles truly is a place where the imagined can become real. And I'm proud that there's one university that brings that all together. It's UCLA. Our motto, did you want to applaud there? It doesn't say hold for. That's like a hope for applause, that's what it could say. No, it's obvious. Our motto is Fiat Lux, let there be light. And for over a century, we've gathered the brightest minds in science, art, medicine, law, and the written word from every background and income bracket, and helped them spread their light. We've become a beacon of knowledge, innovation, and understanding. I love working here. Today, as our university begins a new chapter, we celebrate that legacy, and I am very excited to be your MC as we do just that. Today, you're going to hear from some of UCLA's most celebrated faculty, world-renowned pioneers in health, astrophysics, and math, leaders in the arts, and change makers in the social sciences. But first, it's going to be my honor to bring to the stage our Chancellor. When he accepted this position, he no doubt understood that it would come with challenges. Calm down. He probably didn't guess, however, that in his very first week on the job, our campus and our city would face its most devastating crisis in years. And as wildfires tore through our neighborhoods in January, Chancellor Frank met the moment with steady guidance, timely communication, and a commitment to bring our community together. Thanks to his leadership, UCLA stepped up, offering space at our research park so FEMA and others could coordinate disaster recovery. In that terrible time, we were reminded that we are strongest when we are connected. Chancellor Frank continues to foster unity here. This winter and spring, this is a miraculous feat. It felt like I couldn't believe he was still doing it months after we first started. He met with 38 different schools and campus groups as part of his listening exercise, speaking with Bruins about their hopes, their aspirations for the future, and he has supported programs like this one that help us come together in community. It's an incredible time for UCLA. And I hope I speak for all of us when I say I'm very excited to see what comes next. So please join me in welcoming our Chancellor, Julio Frank.
Thank you, Brian. Good afternoon to everyone. I want to thank all of you for being a part of our inaugural events. This is really a celebration of UCLA. It's a celebration of 106 years of public service and shared purpose. A celebration of connecting communities, and a celebration of everything our university has built together. This is a moment for our entire institution, and I want every Bruin around the world to share in it. As I prepare tomorrow, I do so with deep humility and immense gratitude for the legacy I inherit, for the community I join, and for the future that we will shape together. UCLA is home to approximately 5,400 faculty members, and each is advancing knowledge, sparking curiosity, and serving society. Today's speakers come from across the full landscape of UCLA, from law to medicine, from sciences to mathematics, and from the arts to public policy. They offer a sample of the intellectual, scientific, and artistic richness of this great institution. Through their work, they speak not only for their disciplines, but for a university that is bold in thought, ambitious in reach, and deeply committed to the public good. At a time when the impact of research and the arts is not always fully valued, this symposium showcases the ways in which they heal, inspire, and illuminate. These talks remind us why the work of our faculty matters so deeply, now more than ever. They also provide us a chance to connect, as Brian just said, to come together as a community and sharing the joy of new ideas. So today, in advance of the ceremony tomorrow, we turn the spotlight on 6 extraordinary individuals from our faculty. Professor Kimberly Crenshaw of the UCLA School of Law. She has given a voice to truth with a clarity that echoes across generations. Her vision of intersectionality has reshaped how we understand justice and identity, bringing nuance to public discourse and power to those all too often unheard. Dr. Abbas Ardehali from the David Geffen School of Medicine has given breath and heartbeat to what once seemed impossible. A surgeon and scientist of extraordinary vision, he has redefined the frontiers of transplantation, carrying life between hands across space and time with grace and precision. Professor Andrea Ghez, Nobel laureate from the Department of Physics and Astronomy, has looked into the darkness of the universe and found meaning. She charted the invisible, proved the unseeable, and gave humanity a glimpse into the very heart of our galaxy. Her work reminds us that wonder is a product of the pursuit of knowledge. Professor Terence Tao, a Fields medalist from our Department of Mathematics, moves through numbers as a poet moves through words. With elegance and depth, he reveals patterns in chaos and beauty in abstraction. He reminds us that truth is not always visible, but is always there for those who know how to see. Professor Peter Sellers of the School of the Arts and Architecture composes with light, sound, silence, and conscience. Through performance, he opens portals to empathy, inviting us to face our world with new eyes and full hearts. He transforms art into dialogue and dialogue into change. And Professor Lynn Babrek of Political Science and Public Policy, she helps us understand how democracy behaves, what it listens to, what persuades it, how it shifts and endures. She gives shape to the forces that drive our civic life, and with every insight, she fortifies the democratic project itself. Each of these extraordinary faculty members exemplifies what it means to be a Bruin: brilliant, bold, and dedicated to a better future. As we look to the century ahead, may we follow their light and the light of so many others across this great university. Let us draw strength from their example and from the boundless energy that has powered UCLA since 1919. We are a university that began in a borrowed building with a big dream, and today we are shaping the world. Thank you for being here, and thank you to these 6 luminous minds for helping us imagine and build the next chapter of that world. We are one UCLA. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor Frank, for welcoming us. And now, our speakers. Language is more than just words. It's how we define our identities, how we name the forces that surround us, and how we shape power. With it, we create community, establish laws, share our aspirations for the future we want. And without it, voices get lost, left behind. Our first speaker, Kimberly Crenshaw, has spent her career giving people the language to share their unique experiences, define their obstacles that stand in their way, and write a new future with more justice, equity, and opportunity. Dr. Crenshaw is a trailblazing scholar and writer on civil rights, Black feminist legal theory, race, racism, and the law. As a distinguished professor of law here at UCLA and chair of the Promise Institute in Human Rights, her work pioneering the field of intersectionality, critical race theory, has defined how we understand identities, oppression, and discrimination. And her influence stretches globally, lifting up those whose voices have too often been silenced here in California, the United States, and around the world. Now I'm honored to invite to the stage distinguished professor of law, Kimberly Crenshaw.
Thank you. Thank you. When I was 6, my dream was to play Thorn Rosa, the lead role in a children's musical game that we would play in my newly integrated kindergarten in Canton, Ohio. It was the mid-1960s, and struggles were erupting everywhere about whether Black people would ever secure equal protection under the law, whether Black children could ever access equitable education, and whether racial injustice was possible to be overcome in America. But the most urgent question on my agenda was when I would get to play Thorn Rosa. The Thorn Rosa performance was the highlight of our day, a mashup of Cinderella, Snow White, Rapunzel. The sing-song play included the usual cast of characters: a fairy godmother, a wicked witch, a king and a queen, a handsome prince, extras like horses, pigs, and mice, and of course, the star of the show, the beautiful, the beloved Thorn Rosa. So naturally, every little girl waited for her chance to play Thorn Rosa. So when our teacher asked, "Who's gonna be Thorn Rosa today?" my hand always shot straight up. Despite my enthusiasm, though, every time my teacher passed over me. So I set out to impress her with my dramatic skills. So as the horse, I neighed aplenty. As the mouse, I squeaked and I scurried about. As the witch, I was apparently so convincingly menacing that I won repeat performances in that role. But with the end of the school year coming, I began to panic that I'd lost my chance to be Thorn Rosa. So on the very last day of school, I bugged my teacher every hour, reminding her that I'd not yet played Thorn Rosa. So finally, in the last minutes of the school year, she gathered all the children on the schoolyard, had them circle me with their hands upright for the archway for my grand entrance. So just as the chorus got to the point where I was about to assume the throne, the bell rang. And suddenly all of my classmates broke for summer break, leaving me with a heartbreak. My agony sent piercing wails across the schoolyard that summoned my older brother Mantle to confront whoever it was who had given his baby sister the beat down. Try as he might, he could only make out the name Thorn Rosa through my tears. "Who is this Thorn Rosa?" my brother demanded. "Who are her people? Where do they live?" he asked my friends before setting off to find the Rosa family. With my tears still flowing and the back of my wrist dramatically pressed to my forehead, I put one foot in front of the other, leading a slow, solemn procession of my friends on the way home, repeating the name Thorn Rosa as a coda to my sobs. Throwing myself on my bed, my parents fared no better in understanding what had happened. I didn't have the words to convey what had become my rude awakening, that my girlness was so deficient that I couldn't even be a make-believe princess. Eventually, a call to my teacher revealed what had happened. What stands out for me most is not what my parents said to me, but what they didn't say. They didn't say, "Stop this crying, Kim. The world isn't fair. Get used to it." Nor did they give me some children's version of feminism, as in, why would you want to be trapped in that sexist pedestal as a cage fairy tale anyway? Or as race-conscious parents of the 60s, they might have scoffed at the racial requirement of being a fairy tale princess. Black girls don't want any of that anyway, they might have said. They might have even reminded me that wanting to be Thorn Rosa and being disappointed was certainly nothing compared to being refused service in a restaurant or being denied a job. Worst of all, they might have said there's no point crying over something that we don't have the power to change. Happily, my parents refused to deny that I had been wronged. The thoughtless devaluation faced by little black girls like me had not been widely understood. It didn't have a name. It didn't have a place among the litany of racial injustices that black people were protesting at the time. It was a wound without a salve, one inflicted in the shadows. I caught frequent glimpses of this shadow over time. Trying to uncover that shadowy presence became part of my lifelong search to bring the unique harms experienced by black girls and women out of the darkness. I would finally find a way to cast light on this when I discovered the story of another black woman who also had no name for the harm that she experienced in the shadows. Emma DeGraffenreid sued her employer for discrimination on the basis of race and gender. She faced a dubious judge who couldn't understand how she could have experienced race discrimination because the employer did hire black people, nor how she could make a claim for gender discrimination because the employer did hire women. That the blacks were all men and the women were all white didn't seem to make her claim any more credible to this judge. If she couldn't tell a story as race discrimination or as gender discrimination, then at least according to this judge, there was no legally significant story to tell. Emma's access to justice was compromised because she lacked a framework to capture the unique vulnerability of being a woman who was black and a black person who was a woman. This absence, by now, was familiar to me. But I had a hunch that there was a way to provide a prism to see behind that shadow by visualizing through an everyday metaphor how the dynamics that shaped Emma's experience came together. So I fashioned intersectionality as a word picture that captured the experience of being entrapped by two axes of exclusion, in this instance, racism and sexism. The combined effect was a condition that demanded naming. The consequences could only be addressed with remedies that acknowledged these intersections. I arrived here in 1986 as a young faculty member with this idea that was born out of my experience. And in the years that followed, my colleagues in the law school, in women's studies, in African American studies, in sociology, and elsewhere, nurtured an intellectual environment that helped me water this seedling into a framework that since traveled across disciplines, institutions, and even national boundaries. Over the years, I have seen how intersectionality wasn't just a problem faced by black women, but by women of color, working class women, immigrant women, queer and trans people, disabled people, and in fact, anyone who faces multiply structured disadvantages in law, in employment, education, healthcare, quite frankly, every economic, social issue I've studied since bears the marking of intersectionality. Now, the condition of intersectionality's possibility was the university's openness to new ideas, to new disciplines, to new ways of thinking. It was in this milieu that I taught the first course on critical race theory in the nation, a class committed to interrogating the laws, the norms, and the knowledge systems that had facilitated and justified inequality. And that seed eventually blossomed into the Critical Race Studies program, a new subdiscipline in law that validated knowledge emerging from the margins of our society. So that's the good news. The bad news is that the openness to new ideas that we celebrate here at UCLA is not a universal value. Nor is the idea that knowledge will continue to advance. That's not guaranteed. Reform inevitably produces retrenchment. And sometimes that retrenchment is more enduring than the reforms that preceded it. Consider, for example, that Reconstruction lasted a little over a decade, but it was followed by 7 decades of tyranny. Or that 3 months of racial reckoning in 2020, the largest political mobilization in American history, has been followed by 5 years of backlash. Now, words used by millions of people to tell stories about social injustice are being targeted and censored. What started as a ban on a few words, critical race theory, that was one of them, has now exploded into dozens of words and concepts that have been censored in governmental websites, reports, policies. Words like black, discrimination, disparity, equity, equal opportunity, inequality, intersectionality, implicit bias, racial justice, oppression, segregation, systemic, and women. So I ask you, how do we possibly learn from our past or understand our present should these concepts be purged from our work? How can we tell the story of the Trail of Tears, women's suffrage, the Tulsa race massacre, Japanese internment, redlining, Brown versus Board of Education, the Montgomery bus boycott, the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor without these words? How can we possibly sustain the capacity to address our social problems without the ability to name them, acknowledge them, and historicize them? The coordinated effort to render certain ideas literally unspeakable not only undermines our democracy, but robs us of the capacity to name and historicize our current realities. And there is a point to this. What can't be named can't be seen. What can't be seen can't be addressed. It's like trying to form sentences without grammar and a literacy without words. Maybe that's the point. There are no problems that warrant resolution, but only words that indoctrinate us into thinking that there are. Could it be that the desire to silence our ideas reflects the recognition that these ideas make a difference? And then there are those who say the purging of words is inconsequential because the underlying realities can be described in other ways. But at some point, we can't keep searching for synonyms when the entire dictionary is being thrown out of the window. When we acquiesce to eliminating words because some have tried to redefine or misconstrue their meaning, we allow raw power rather than the pursuit of knowledge to dictate the content of our courses. So what is there for us to do? I have no magic bullets here. We have no magic shields. Our universities do not stand apart from history. We rise or fall with it. The only guarantee, though, is if we don't fight for our freedom to think and to learn, then we will lose it. Academic freedom is not merely incidental or a byproduct of our democracy, it is its cornerstone. As Toni Morrison so presciently noted, if the university does not take seriously and rigorously its role as guardian of wider civic freedoms, as interrogator of more and more complex ethical problems, as servant and preserver of deeper democratic practices, then some other regime or menage of regimes will do it for us, in spite of us, and without us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Crenshaw. What an incredible start to today. Should I not go off the script? Look what happened. If you've ever binged The Pit or Grey's Anatomy, or yes, even ER, our next speaker is for you. Why do you write it that way, or even ER? Is it basically saying, like, if you recognize that, you're old? That's basically what it's saying. That's why it's written that way. Dr. Abbas Ardahali, professor of surgery and medicine at the David Geffen School of Medicine, isn't here to tell us about makeshift breathing tubes or elevator romances, but I assure you, his work is just as dramatic. Dr. Ardahali works with organ transplants. In fact, he and his team have revolutionized the field by creating a way to keep hearts and lungs alive and working outside of a human body. He's the first surgeon in the United States to ever perform a transplant using one of these techniques. And his first patient, Fernando Padilla, a carpenter, who helped build our Ronald Reagan UCLA Medical Center, the very hospital where his life was saved by a breathing organ. Incredible, right? Please help me welcome to the stage Professor of Surgery and Medicine, Dr. Abbas Ardahali.
Is my mic on? Yes. It's wonderful to be here with you this afternoon. It was about 57 years ago that the first human heart transplant was performed in Cape Town, South Africa. This is the front page of the local newspaper about 7 or 8 days later. It has many things that we now consider violation of patient privacy and HIPAA. Front and center, you see actually the picture of the patient and his wife. Right below that, you see the picture of two individuals who received the kidneys from this donor. And most strikingly, you see the picture of the donor to your left side, a 29-year-old woman who was involved in a motor vehicle accident and was the donor. Right below that, at the bottom, you see the surgeon, the heart transplant surgeon, smiling. Well, over the past 50-some years, many things have changed, but two things have not. One is that we just don't have enough donor organs. At any given time in this country, we have over 100,000 patients waiting for a life-saving organ transplant. The second thing is that we have limited time from the time that we take the donor organ to the time that we actually transplant it into the recipient. For hearts, it's somewhere between 4 to 6 hours. Beyond 6 hours, the heart may not just work. When we get a donor offer at any hospital in California or beyond, we send a team out. They rush to the donor hospital, they stop the donor organs, and put them on ice, and carry them here to UCLA or at any recipient hospital using an igloo cooler, a cooler that you can get at any local hardware store. And when the heart comes here, it is in a bag of ice with a lot of slush, and when they hand it to us, it's actually frozen. A human heart that is frozen during transport. Well, several decades ago, some of us began asking the question, there must be a better way that we can preserve human organs for transplantation rather than freezing them. What if we could actually take the donor blood, put it on a circuit, put the human organ in the circuit, and have the blood circulate through the organ? As far as the donor organ is concerned, it's still in the donor body because it's doing what it does. A human heart in this machine continues to pump, it's beating, the human lung continues to breathe, the human liver continues to produce bile, and of course the kidney makes urine. This is a device that's portable. It houses the heart, and when the heart is on it, it continues to beat just like a normal human heart. In fact, this is one of the earliest hearts that we have ever done with this technology on a patient about 12 years ago. And this heart, it's still beating in somebody's chest in Southern California. The pivotal study that showed that this technology is safe and it works was this study that's pioneered at UCLA that subsequently led to the FDA approval of this technology, now being a common practice throughout the country. When it comes to the lung, it continues to breathe on the machine. There is blood circulating through it. We actually have access to the airway. We can actually go in there and clean out the airway so that we have a better lung for transplantation. The first lung, as you already heard, was transplanted here at UCLA. Although this technology has been transformational, there are issues with it. As you can imagine, this technology keeps the donor organ on a device with the same blood circulating through it for hours and hours. So toxic metabolites build up in the circuit. There is no kidney associated or liver associated with it, and therefore it doesn't clear the circuit. So about 2 years ago, we asked the question, what can we do to make this a better circuit? What if we could actually connect the recipient's blood to the organ so that the organ gets repaired and resuscitated using the recipient's blood before we actually transplant it? You can think of it as a test drive, that we actually test the organ before we transplant it. In fact, we did the first experiment about 2 weeks ago with promising results, and we're now working with the FDA to be the first center in the world to use this technology using the recipient's own blood to resuscitate the donor organ before we open their chest, before we open their abdomen. So stay tuned. There is more coming. What are the potential applications of this technology? We already talked about the fact that we can keep the human organs alive for hours and even days. The longest that a human heart has been kept alive on this device was over 26 hours in Kazakhstan, believe it or not. The other way that this technology can help improve things is that it can potentially expand the donor pool. As I mentioned, there are thousands of patients waiting for donor organs. We just don't have enough donors. But we can potentially put a donor organ that has a condition and then treat it and expand the donor pool. For example, a donor lung that has pneumonia, we can put it on the machine, treat it with very high doses of antibiotics, and treat the infection before we actually transplant the donor organ. So potentially expand the donor pool substantially. But what is most exciting to me, what keeps me working every day, waking up every morning with excitement, is the fact that we can potentially engineer better organs in the future. We can take an organ, make some changes in it, and make it a better organ for transplantation. An example, Many of you know that O blood type individuals are universal donors. They can donate to everyone. But O blood type individuals are very difficult to find an organ for. In fact, right now we have tens of patients waiting in our ICUs at Ronald Reagan, UCLA, waiting for O donor blood type organs. We and others have shown that we can actually convert an A blood type or a B blood type on this platform to an O donor. Imagine having abundant and limitless number of universal donor organs. And most excitingly, the possibility of creating an organ that is no longer considered foreign, an organ that cannot be rejected. As you know, each of us have our proteins on their body that are unique to each of us. When an organ gets transplanted, we have to treat the recipients with medications called immunosuppressive medications. And if we can create an organ that is no longer expressing those proteins, it's possible that transplantation can occur without immunosuppression. Over the past 4 or 5 decades, UCLA has been a major force in advancement of science, medicine, and specifically in organ transplantation. Did you know that UCLA has done more organ transplant than any other hospital, medical center, or health system in the United States since 1988, when the Department of Health and Human Services began counting numbers? Did you know that the standard of treatment for heart transplants that is now widely practiced throughout the world, any patient who gets a heart transplant gets treated with these medications? They were developed and tested and proven at UCLA. Did you know that UCLA has the largest experience for patients who have undergone lung transplantation and also heart surgery at the same time? These are the patients that would not be candidates anywhere. But at UCLA, we have the largest experience of that. UCLA has done more than 8,000 liver transplants. Did you know that you can actually get a kidney transplant at UCLA, and a year later, you would be free of immunosuppression? UCLA is the only one. Did you know that UCLA did the first bladder transplant in the world? Some of you may know because this was all over the news the past month or so. Well, let's fast forward to 10 years from now, June of 2035. A patient who has end-stage organ disease through no fault of their own, probably because of a genetic condition or an exposure to an agent that was outside of their control, needs an organ transplant. They actually schedule the organ transplant on a certain day at Ronald Reagan UCLA Medical Center. They come to the hospital, which, by the way, still has a banner that says #1 in Los Angeles, #1 in California, but in 2035, #1 in the country. This individual goes to the operating room. On the way, they may actually see their organ in an ICU, which is being perfected, engineered, tailored to that specific recipient. Talking about ultimate precision medicine. This individual undergoes his or her organ transplant. Several days later, they walk out of Ronald Reagan UCLA Medical Center with little or no immunosuppression. Truly a second chance in life. Well, over the past several decades, UCLA has been a major force in advances in science, medicine, and organ transplantation. But I submit to you, the best is yet to come. It's indeed a truly exciting and remarkable time for us as a Bruin community. Thank you.
That was incredible, Dr. Adahali. Extraordinary. What about that video of the beating heart? It does kind of look like it's in Tupperware, though. I know we're done with the igloo. Humans have always looked to the heavens and seen themselves in the stars. Those swirling constellations have inspired epic journeys and fantastic myths and the wisdom of something greater than ourselves. But it wasn't the twinkling points of light that fascinated our next speaker. It was the absences around them. Andrea Ghez is a professor of physics and astronomy who discovered a supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy. For her work, she became the 4th woman to win the Nobel Prize in Physics. She's also the first woman to receive the Crawford Prize, one of the world's most prestigious science prizes. In her work, Dr. Ghez found that the darkness of the universe has as much to teach us as the light. And we're so grateful she's here to share these lessons with us today. Please welcome Distinguished Professor of Physics and Astronomy, Dr. Andrea Ghez.
All right. How do you observe something you can't see? That is an essential question if you want to find and study black holes, because black holes are objects whose pull of gravity is so intense that nothing can escape them, not even light. The story I'd like to share with you today is how we've been able to discover a supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy and transform our understanding of the universe. But this is also a story of how UCLA understood the opportunity to invest in a new and emergent field that was a strength of Los Angeles and put itself at a forefront of discovery. I came to UCLA because of the Keck telescopes. These are the largest telescopes in the world, and they are co-owned by the University of California and Caltech. They represent an enormous university investment. $200 million to build, $50,000 a night to run. Tools like these are what put the University of California as one of the leaders in the field of astronomy and astrophysics. They are also why 1 in 5 researchers in this field are at the University of California. We have the best telescopes in the world, which are like modern-day pyramids. This is me. And the program I launched 30 years ago was designed to develop new methods for using these telescopes to find and study black holes. Specifically, the objective was to measure the orbits of stars at the galactic center. While today this program seems obvious, my first proposal 30 years ago was turned down. The review committee did not think our technique would work. And this is when I discovered my favorite expression, which is, every challenge is an opportunity. I had convinced my UCLA colleagues that this was a great idea, but I still had yet to convince my other colleagues that it was. Let's just say that I learned how to make the case, and I gave a lot of talks, and a year later, we were off and running on the first 3-year leg of this program. Today, this program has grown into something that is far larger than I could have possibly imagined 30 years ago. We are a core team of 24 people, and we have a collaboration network of about 100 people around the world. And we are answering questions that I simply could not have imagined when we first started. And we are in a leadership position of a $1 billion project. Okay, so what is a black hole? Well, black holes require relatively exotic physics to properly describe them. The way I'd like you to think about a black hole today is that it's an object whose mass is confined to 0 volume. So despite the fact that I'm going to talk to you about objects that are supermassive, they have no finite size. And in physics, anytime you have something that has no finite size, it's like a giant red arrow saying, you do not have your description of physics correct here. The problem is we don't know how to make the field of quantum mechanics, which is the description of physics at small scales, work together with general relativity, which is our best description of gravity. And black holes are certainly small and have strong gravity. This is what makes black holes so interesting to study. They are really at the frontier of our understanding of the physical world. While black holes have no finite size, there is an important size or radius that is associated with them. It's known as the Schwarzschild radius, or the event horizon, as you may know it from Star Trek. This size is important because if an object, and I mean any object, is compressed down to this scale, it will become a black hole. So once an object is confined to the Schwarzschild radius, the object's gravity overcomes all other known forces, and the object will continue to collapse to become the infinitesimally small object and become a black hole. So to prove the existence of a black hole, we must show that an object's mass is confined to within its Schwarzschild radius. Okay, where do we find them? So our theories of how galaxies form suggest that they have a supermassive black hole at their center, and that it regulates the future growth of the galaxy. So if we want to prove that it's correct that black holes reside at the center of galaxy, there's one galaxy that is the best place to study, and that's our own. It is, after all, the closest. So remember, to prove that there's a black hole, we need to show that there's a lot of mass confined to a small volume. To do this, we need to find stars at the center of the galaxy and to be able to measure how they move. Stars will orbit the black hole just like the Earth will orbit the sun. So we are inward bound, and we have the telescopes that should, in principle, be able to see these objects. But the challenge is the Earth's atmosphere. Sure, the atmosphere is good for us. It allows us to survive here on Earth, but it blurs our images of astronomical sources. And you know the saying about how car crashes happen close to home? Well, imagine this. The light that we are studying has been traveling to us for 26,000 years. And in the last 30 microseconds, it hits the top of the atmosphere and suffers tremendous damage. So I've spent much of my career developing techniques for overcoming the distorting effects of the Earth's atmosphere. And by doing this, we've discovered thousands of stars that are at the very heart of our galaxy. So once we could see these stars clearly, we could not only estimate their speeds, which is all we had envisioned doing at the outset of this program, but we could also measure complete orbits, which is a much more powerful approach to measuring enclosed mass. You can probably find my favorite star in the galaxy. It has the very exotic name of SO2. Its orbital period is 16 years. And for context, it takes the sun 200 million years to go around the center of our galaxy. It is truly amazing to be able to see something in our universe that happens on a human timescales. Okay, so before we started this experiment, we knew that there was 4 million times the mass of the sun inside this giant circle. And what this experiment has done for us is to show that that mass is confined to a much smaller volume. Knowing that increased the evidence for a supermassive black hole by a factor of 10 million. So think about anything you would like more of and what it would mean to have a factor of 10 million times more of it. For my kids, without a doubt, this would be their allowance. The advance we have made over the last 30 years has moved the notion of a supermassive black hole from a possibility to a certainty. And it was what was recognized with the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2020. It was awarded to 3 people, a theorist and the leaders of 2 competing teams, including mine. Now, people often ask me, now that you've, are you done? Now that you've won a Nobel Prize. And my answer is always, absolutely not. There's so much more to learn. Almost every prediction for what we should have seen around this black hole has been inconsistent with our observations. We have discovered young stars where there should be none. Those are the blue-green stars. We see a dearth of old stars where they should be plentiful. Those are the orange stars. And we have discovered stars that are being destroyed in real time by the black hole. Those are the pink stars. For me, it's like being a kid in a candy shop. There's so much more to be learned. And we are not only not done, but we are advancing the next generation of instrumentation for another decade of discovery. We are pursuing how gravity works and how black holes shape both their host galaxies and the universe. And as we celebrate this next chapter here at UCLA, I can't help but think about the things that this university has made possible. My team was, shall we say, scrappy, not the most established group of luminaries around. And our project didn't seem important to a lot of people. But the University of California and UCLA gave us the tools to look deep into the universe. And we were able to bring something incredible into focus. We showed the world something that's impossible to see directly, and discovered more questions than answer. And that's what UCLA does every day. We ask questions. We explore those things still shrouded in darkness. And we bring new knowledge and understanding into focus. And I'm so proud and grateful to be part of this incredible institution. Thank you.
Dr. Guez, you always send my mind swirling with imagination. Thank you so much. Incredible. The French mathematician Joseph Fourier once said, "Mathematics compares the most diverse phenomena and discovers the secret analogies that unite them." And if math had sounded that mysterious when I was in school, I might not have ended up a theater kid. Luckily, here at UCLA, Professor Terence Tao has spent his career helping us all understand how figures and formulas connect us to our universe and to each other. And in his classroom, you'll see the beauty of binomial. That word looks so crazy on my screen now, but I think I got it right. Theater kid. Remember theater kid? In his classroom, you'll see the beauty of a binomial, find the grace of geometry, and learn how to listen to the music of this universal language. In fact, his colleagues here call him the Mozart of math. And today we're here to talk about the future we're writing with these tools and the harmony or discord that they can create. So please help me welcome James and Carol Collins Chair and Professor of Mathematics, Terence Tao.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak here. It's, in these times we need leadership. It's more important than ever. So, yeah, I'll be talking about, well, the whole world is changing, of course, but also mathematics as well. But we are a very traditional bunch. In many ways, the way we work today is not that different from the way we worked 100 years ago, 200 years ago. On the left here, we have a memoir by Augustus Cauchy, one of the great mathematicians of the 19th century. It's in French, and it's not typeset of a computer, but to a math graduate student here at UCLA, the textbooks that he or she would learn from are not that much different from this book, which was published exactly 200 years ago. We still use blackboard and chalk. In fact, we are very particular about what kind of chalk we use. We're maybe almost the last department that hangs on to them. And over on the right here, we have this coffee table book by Jessica Wynn. She's a photographer. She was fascinated by the math we leave on our blackboards, and she actually she viewed them as works of art, and she photographed them and made a nice little collection. Another way in which mathematicians are different, or at least have not caught up to other sciences, is that we still find it hard to collaborate. In the rest of our division, physics and chemistry, people have worked out how to collaborate with 50 people, 100 people, on Andrea's collaboration, for instance. But still in math, we struggle to work with, more than 5 people. And there are reasons. There's a high barrier to entry. I know you're not mathematicians, most of you. You may not have noticed, but a lot of math is rather technical, has a lot of jargon. And you need first high school math, algebra, and then calculus, and then graduate level math to even understand many of the problems we work on. So you already need a math PhD to even just begin working on many of these projects. Also, we have this very, very high standard of proof. If a proof has 20 steps and one of them is wrong, the whole proof falls apart. So if you collaborate with 20 people and one of them doesn't produce good work, you're in trouble. And our workflows don't scale. I told you we love our blackboards. We can have 3 or 5 people at a blackboard talking back and forth. It's amazing. We can't have 50 people at a blackboard. So we haven't figured out, until recently, we have not figured out how to collaborate the same way that the other sciences have done very successfully. So, are we missing out on all this good stuff? Well, things are changing. So thanks to new technologies and new culture, actually, new workflows are emerging. We are beginning to do genuinely large-scale projects. Still not quite as large as the other sciences, but we're going to catch up. If math was a social science, it would be as if, until recently, we could only do case studies. We could take an individual and interview them and do a fine analysis of one person. But now we can do population surveys. We can start studying thousands and thousands of problems at the same time. We're beginning to broaden participation. As I said, right now there's so much of a high barrier to entry. Mathematicians mostly talk to other mathematicians. But in other sciences, there are citizen science projects that involve the general public or academics from other disciplines, and we're beginning to have that here in mathematics. And we have this fancy new technology of AI and machine learning. We are still experimenting with how to use it properly. We know also ways how not to use it. But there are some positive use cases that are proof of concept. And the secret sauce that makes all this work is that there's a technology called formal verification. It was developed by computer scientists, but mathematicians have embraced it. It is specialized computer languages that you can feed in things like a mathematical proof. If you do it in the right language, it will give you a certificate that says this is correct, this is not correct, and it's not correct, where are the errors. And without this, none of the other developments would be possible. So I'll just briefly talk about one project that I started here at UCLA last year. It's called the Equational Theories Project. It is a project in algebra. Now, I don't want to talk about the specifics of algebra, but maybe in your high school algebra classes, you may have heard of the commutative law, x times y equals y times x. You may have heard of the associative law, x times y times z equals x times y times z, if you put the brackets the other way. And you can write many, many other laws like that. So what we did was we generated a population of about 4,000 or 5,000 laws. Now, in algebra, historically, algebraists study one law at a time. They do a case study. They take one algebraic law and they study all its consequences very, very thoroughly. But we wanted to do a population survey. We would take 4,000 odd laws and ask, how do they interact with each other? Which laws imply which other ones? What is the landscape of algebra? And because of all the pairs that you could consider, this ended up being 22 million problems that we had to study. Given 22 million pairs of laws, which one is stronger than another? For example, does the commutative law imply the associative law? Now, a graduate student here at UCLA in mathematics, a typical problem, they could probably work it out in maybe an hour with pen and paper. But there's 22 million of these problems, and some of them are actually too tricky to do it in an hour. There are computers, and computers can handle a fair chunk of these problems at a time, but no computer program can sort of handle all of them. So there's no way that a single person or single program can do this. You have to collaborate. But then there's this other problem that if you have people coming in with 22 million proofs, and one of them is wrong, your whole project doesn't work. Someone has to grade 22 million proofs. So that is not feasible until recently. Okay. But nevertheless, we did this in 3 months with 50 people Some at UCLA, some international. Most have not met. Professional mathematicians, computer scientists, people from industry, just members of the general public who like solving puzzles. We completed it in 3 months. We had to develop new workflows to do this. There's lots and lots of very diverse proofs that are coming in. Some were human-generated with pen and paper. Some were computer-generated by these things called automated theorem provers, very, very early versions of AI, think of it like that. And then we had these chat rooms on the internet where we would try to collate them and figure out how to convert them to this proof-assistant language. It's called Lean, that verifies all these inputs. And then someone had to develop visualization tools to see what portion of our implication landscape was still missing and what needed to be done. And we had to direct, and that had to loop back to all the other collaborators. It was a really, really fun project to work on, actually. And we're hoping that this is a paradigm for future large-scale collaborations. Okay, so I will talk about AI. This is the technology of the decade. So in principle, this is a really, really promising technology. And we're already using it somewhat. It's really great for secondary tasks. I can write computer code now to simulate all kinds of mathematics. It's so easy with these tools. It's great. And just recently, they've become useful tools for literature review, which also was a very tedious task in the past. If you feed them the right data sets, they can generate new mathematical conjectures. They can find mathematical patterns. We have a shortage of good data sets currently, but that's something that we're working on. But to me, the application of AI that's most exciting is that they are a universal translator. The really complicated topics in mathematics can be explained. You can ask an AI to explain at the level of a high school student, or you just tell it what you know, and it will try to match your language. And conversely, if an amateur mathematician wants to talk to a professional, if they use AI, in principle, they can speak with correct, using the correct mathematical jargon and in a really comprehensible way. And so I think we can really collaborate with other scientists, with members of the general public in ways that we've not been able to do before. But AI is a very flawed technology. It has many, many issues with it. The issue which concerns mathematicians the most is that it just makes mistakes, lots and lots of mistakes. The modern AI tools are not grounded in reality. They hallucinate all kinds of very plausible-looking nonsense. And maybe in some other fields, this might be acceptable. Actually, it's problematic everywhere, really. But in math, it is particularly bad because of this 100% correctness requirement in our proofs. But we have these formal proof verifiers that are think of them as like extremely fussy graders. That they can take the output of a large language model and they can give it a correctness certificate, or they can point out the errors. And so they can filter out all the bad hallucinations and only keep the small percentage of actual correct statements. And it's only very recently we can experiment with this, but the proof of concepts are very promising that this could be a powerful combination and a way to safely use these AI tools. And I asked an AI to generate an image to illustrate this point. So the LM output is this sort of sewage-looking kind of mathematics, and then we have this filter to produce drinkable mathematics, I guess. Okay. So just to close, I've been here 29 years, not quite as long as Andrea. At UCLA, but I've always been very grateful at the opportunities here and the freedom that it's given me to explore new directions. This type of work is not what I was hired for to do here 29 years ago, but I very much align with UCLA's ideals, the idea that diverse communities can come together and talk and produce great things that they could not do on their own, and that's really informed my own research. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tao. So interesting. And I can assure everyone this is also not the type of work I was hired to do here. One of the best parts of being a professor here is that I not only get to teach students, I also get to learn from my incredible colleagues. And this next colleague is one whose lectures I go to still every time I can. And everyone has something to learn from MacArthur Fellow and Distinguished Professor in our Department of World Arts and Cultures, Professor Peter Sellers. Peter understands the art of theater. He's helped our community explore and illuminate the most pressing issues of our time: race, war, poverty, and the international refugee crisis. His work has been called groundbreaking and transformative. In fact, when I was in grad school, I had a professor, a costume design professor, Dunya Ramakova, who works frequently with Peter on productions as his designer. And I remember we were looking together at some images and video from a production of Peter's. I said, Dunya, what's happening there? This is so extraordinary. It was this truly creative, incredible moment. I said, what does that mean? What does it mean in that moment? What's he getting at? She said, actually, Brian, I asked Peter the same question when we were working on the project. And Peter said, Dunya, it's just razzmatazz. Wait, what? Sometimes it's just razzmatazz. But there's so much more to Peter's work. Peter never forgets that theater is also joy. And that even razzmatazz, a lesson I still remember now and every time I'm directing a production, has a role to play. And in Peter's work, surprise and substance are never far apart. Please help me welcome Distinguished Professor Peter Sellers.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much. What a pleasure to be here with this amazing group of people. And what a pleasure to be at UCLA. I've been here for 40 years now, and I first came when I was much younger and running the Los Angeles Festival, which was the continuation of the Olympic Arts Festival. And it was saying, okay, what can we do with the arts in a moment in history where there is a lot to say, and it needs to be said a lot better. One of the first tasks was to move the arts out of art centers, because nobody needs an art center because that separates the arts from the world. And in fact, art is the only place that you can actually create a zone of permanent justice. It's the only place you can create a zone of permanent healing. It's the place you create a zone where nobody wins and nobody loses. Because every time you set up another situation where somebody won and somebody lost, you've set up the conditions for the next war. How do we create an ecosystem where everybody benefits and everybody invests in the community and in each other humanly? Where the profit is extraordinary human beings. Every human being is a miracle. How clueless are we about that? How utterly clueless. At some point, you have to say, this human being is a jewel, is precious, is not for sale, is priceless. I say to my students, please look at that part of your life that is not for sale. Please ask yourself what you would do that nobody pays you to do. You do it because that's who you are. That's what you're on this earth to do. You're here to do something your parents could not do, their parents could not do, and their parents could not do. And that's why we value our students here, because thank God they are young. And I just plead with these students to stay young and to be young right now. And I plead with the adults to try being a little younger also. Because students are not wrong. They're feeling something, and they're here to move the world forward. And that's what makes teaching the greatest honor of your life and the hardest thing in your life. Teaching a class is much harder than directing a film, because the students here are asking you really deeply the questions no one else will ever ask. And they're insisting that the answers be real. And for me, this generation's thirst for justice, this generation's need not to compromise, because they've lived in a world where the lies are winning and where a lie is valued as truth, and where truth is devalued openly. And of course, in this world, you can usually tell which things are lies because people have to scream them and insist on them with incredible violence. And truth usually speaks much more quietly. We all know in our own families when certain types of speech or actions are forbidden and are not allowed. It does not create peace. It creates a nightmare for everyone. What cannot be spoken is internalized as rage, as hurt, and you never know when it's going to come out and the way it's going to come out. And in fact, it is the source of violence. The arts exist as a way to open channels of communication that have been closed. And every time a channel of communication is closed, is shut down, violence follows. Human beings have to talk about everything. We have so much to talk about, and we have to really get good at talking about it. And nobody can do this alone. We need to do it together, and we need to do it with wide ranges of groups of people, very different people together in very courageous and honest exchange. I am very privileged to teach at a program at UCLA called World Arts and Cultures. That is, everything is plural. There's no singular anything. Get used to plural everything. When any human being walks in the room, a world just walked into the room. In fact, many worlds. Don't think you know who somebody is because you think how they're dressed or what their political association is, because every human being is so many other things. Beautiful Lebanese author Amin Maalouf has a book called Murderous Identities. As long as you think somebody's identity is just Palestinian or just Jewish, you can kill them. But that doesn't include any of our grandmothers, who are so many things. Humans are so many things. None of us are one thing. That depth of real deep identity. I ask my students to write down how many communities they're part of and stop at 100. How many things you care about, what kind of music you love, just go down. A human being is so rich. Nobody reduces, and no one ever will reduce. And anyone who's spotting my grandmother from some satellite surveillance and directing a bomb towards them does not know my grandmother for 1 second. And obviously, we're living in a world where context is in the context of no context. So your freedom fighter is my terrorist. And we're both looking at the same gesture, and we don't know how to read it. So this question of context, this question of beginning to spend time with people who are not like us and we don't like, but in fact, we live in this world together, and we're all responsible together. And if there's going to be change, if there's going to be progress, if there's going to be movement, it has to happen together. That's with the people you like and with the people you don't like. So can we get over the fact that growing up thinking of all the things you like and the people you like is just a total waste of time? Because the world was not created based on who you like and who you don't like. Everybody's here. So how do we live together? How do we move together? The arts are to use poetry to detox language. Open language up. Get out of these nightmare, tight, violent statements and move into poetry. Let spirituality shine through words. Let deep emotion, passion, and compassion find form and eloquence in music. And yes, in dance, let's move together. Let's create architecture to have spaces that are public and private, that have equilibrium and openness, open-mindedness in the design. What I'm trying to say is, anybody who thinks the arts are expensive, let's say the world minus the arts is so much more expensive. We are condemned to pointless, clueless, ignorant violence. And that ignorance is very expensive. And that culture of lies, I'm sorry, but no lie will ever be true. No matter how many times you say it, and the truth is going to wait, because it knows it's true. One of the things we're looking for from artists is artists have a chance to, nobody has to vote for them, they don't have to win a popularity contest, they don't have to be successful. In fact, most of the artists we most admire died thinking they were failures because they had the courage to say something that no one else would say and stand by it. And we read those words 400 years later and are so moved and are reminded of our own centers. But those people died official failures. And for me, that narrative of failure is so much more attractive than many other narratives of success. And what the arts are inviting us to do is just look, as my colleagues have said, look at the invisible. Look at the invisible, listen to what people can't say. Can you hear that? And then how can you create the conditions where they can finally speak? That's our life work. And not just speak, but be, exfoliate, become who they are, because we're told by globalization that we're all the same, we're just not equal. But in fact, the reality is we are all equal and we are not the same. And equality is based on the fact that nobody is replaceable. Every human being is irreplaceable and does not duplicate any other human being. And that is the power of being alive right now, and the power of convening and creating gatherings. A lot of my life was to create these large festivals. The Los Angeles Festival in 1993 was programmed by 350 people, was entirely devoted to Arab, Jewish, and Black art and artists and communities in the Gulf War and 1 year after the LA uprising. And so the Palestinian Dance Company was at Wilshire Boulevard Temple. The Armenian Orthodox Church had Chicano punk band, and the Arab blowout Arab music festival was at Second Baptist Church on Central Avenue. And yes, people met each other for the first time. People heard each other for the first time. People actually learned who each other were for the first time and were in each other's Rolodexes, because the city is astonishing. Everybody is here. But people need the invitation. Very important for me is that possibility of speaking about the things that are illegal. That's what we do in the arts. We go right into areas of pain, of anger, of misunderstanding, and of historical harm. And that place has to be detoxed because it's sitting there. We're all carrying it with us. We now know, of course, that our mother's traumas and our grandmother's traumas are in every cell of our bodies. We're all carrying this stuff. We've got to process it. So one of the reasons why beauty exists is to put down your weapons and just realize the beauty of life, the depth of the beauty of life, the fragility and just infinite, infinite joy that's waiting in every human being. Everyone. May I just say that what's great is what's coming is better than what was before. You know, that nostalgia thing that the past is great and we want to bring back the past, that is the original fascist trope, and it was never good. Okay, so let's just actually work on the things that were never good ever in human history, anywhere. That's the work ahead of us. I'm just going to read a poem from 1947 by a great Iraqi poet. Revolt against the sun. She stood before the sun, screaming out loud, "Oh sun, my rebel's heart is just like you. While young, it washed away much of my life. Its lights quenched the stars' thirst, ever renewed. Careful, don't let the sadness in my eyes or these copious tears deceive your sight. This sadness is the form of my revolt, to which the gods bear witness every night." There's a generation of young people all over the world growing up with authoritarian regimes who cannot speak and are not seeing their dreams. Youth suicide rates at this moment are just shocking. And when a generation of young people is saying something's wrong, we have to listen, hand them the microphone, because each generation is here to make more justice in the world. And we need to welcome them and support them with everything we have. Which is why it's a pleasure to teach at UCLA in a context that is so alive and diverse and challenging, and that is not shy and is not in fear of the most difficult issues on earth. That's why we're here. And of course, now for our students, we can say, well, you have no budget to work with. the money's gone. Of course, Euripides would say, you know, anybody who mistakes money for freedom is making a big mistake, because money doesn't bring freedom. He said this, of course, as oligarchs destroyed the original Greek democracy. Don't confuse money with freedom, ever. And of course, in the arts, what we do is we create something from nothing every day. And that nothing is not nothing. It's all the things you ever thought and felt and no one ever noticed. And that's huge. It's immense. And it's powerful. So our invitation now is for our students to work with what the Buddhists call the 4 immeasurables, which will never run out: compassion, generosity, courage, and love. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I don't have a joke here, but if you ever have a chance to see one of Peter's productions, please, please go and see it wherever it is in the world. Your work has inspired me since I was a student, and I think about your productions often. Okay. You know, after structural injustice, black holes, and life-saving, you're going to have to move that. Chris, you got to move me forward on the... Whew. This could have been... I've seen it happen to others. Now I'd hear it. Now stop there. Life-saving transplants. This is going to mess up. My whole joke is not going to work here now. I don't even know how to recover. You what? I'll laugh. Thank you. You're going to laugh no matter what I say? Heart transplant. All right, I'm going to try it again. Let's back up a little. All right. Here we go. You know, after structural injustice, black holes, life-saving transplants, we thought we'd showcase a lighter topic, the future of politics in America. Work great, no problem. Lynn Vavreck published her first book on a half-century of American presidential campaigns back in 2009. Since then, she's written best-selling books about every presidential election, published papers and articles in the nation's leading newspapers and journals, and analyzed every presidential campaign ad ever aired. Is that true? I do not approve this message. Her insight helps our students deepen their understanding of the country they call home. And while she can't help you navigate your family group text or your Thanksgiving dinners, she can tell us why they got so tense. Please welcome Marvin Hoffenberg, Professor of American Politics and Public Policy, Professor Lynn Vavreck.
Thanks, Bob. Okay, let's dive right in and talk about politics. If you've been avoiding the news and wondering, when will politics go back to the way it used to be, you are not alone. It turns out the one thing that people in both political parties and those in the middle agree on right now is that lately, politics just feels bad. According to the Pew Research Center, nearly everyone in the country agrees that political debate has gotten less respectful in recent years. And our ratings of the opposition, they have hit an all-time low. American politics feels broken, and I'm going to tell you why. The answer to this question has to do with what my co-authors and I call calcification. And I know you think this guy needs a heart transplant, but stick with me here. Calcification makes our politics stiff, rigid, and painful, just like it does to bones in the human body. Now, calcification sounds a lot like polarization, but it's not polarization. It's polarization plus, and the plus is really important. There are 4 drivers of political calcification. The first 2 have been happening since the mid-1960s and the passage of the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. And the second 2 are much more recent, happening in, say, the last decade and a half. The first 2 drivers of calcification have to do with the nature of political parties and the fact that, 1, there's an increasing sameness within each of the political parties, and 2, despite the sameness within party, there's an increasing distance between the 2 parties. The other side is farther away than ever. That's what most people think of as polarization, and that is not enough to get us to stiff, rigid, and painful. In order to get there, we've got to add these last 2 components of calcification. So the third is a change in the underlying dimension of political conflict, a change in what we're fighting over. And the fourth driver of calcification is that we just happen to be at a moment in time when we're in rough balance in the electorate between Democrats and Republicans. To help us appreciate the importance of these last 2 more recent drivers of calcification, the part that's getting us to stiff, rigid, and painful, I want to introduce you to 2 Americans. Samuel Joseph, or Joe, Wurzelbacher, and Philomena Philistine. We'll start with Joe, who you may remember as Joe the Plumber. In 2008, in Holland, Ohio, here's his hometown, he met Barack Obama on the campaign trail. Joe was thinking of starting a plumbing business, and he was worried that his taxes would go up under Obama's tax plan. John McCain and Barack Obama spent the better part of 3 weeks debating Joe's taxes in 2008. 16 years later, in 2024, just 150 miles down the freeway in Springfield, Ohio, Philomena and the 15,000 other Haitian immigrants like her found themselves at the center of a very different kind of political debate when J.D. Vance and Donald Trump falsely claimed they were eating their neighbors' cats and dogs. That is a change in the underlying dimension of political conflict. In place of a debate about Joe's taxes, in 2024, the question had become about something much deeper. Essentially, who deserves to be an American? Who belongs? For most of my lifetime, and probably most of yours, politics has been contested over New Deal type issues. Things like the role and size of government, the tax rate. That's Joe the plumber in 2008. Today, we are fighting over a very different set of issues, person-based issues, identity-inflected issues. Things like immigration, religious tests to enter the country, sports teams, bathrooms, medical decision-making, marriage. These issues are more divisive than those New Deal issues because they are harder to compromise on. Think about it. When we were talking about Joe's taxes in 2008, you could want the tax rate to be 35%, I could want it to be 30%, we could compromise at 32.5%, each feel like we gave a little, we got a little, each walk away feeling like it was kind of a win. But today, on these person-based issues, compromise is harder. Take marriage. You can't be married on Monday and Tuesday, not on Wednesday and Thursday, and on Friday, only if you want to be. Compromise is harder. And that means that at any given point in time, half the country is living under an outcome that is very far away from what they want. Half the country feels like they're losing all the time. It's just a different half of the country, depending on which party's in the White House. That makes politics feel bad, no matter which side you're on. And when I say half the country, I literally mean half the country. And that's going to get us to the last driver of calcification, that rough balance in the electorate between Democrats and Republicans. When we were fighting over those New Deal issues, we had elections that turned on millions, if not tens of millions of votes, landslide election outcomes. And when policy changed after those elections, it changed slowly and often in bipartisan ways, even though tens of millions of people had said, we want that. Today, our elections are photo finishes, not landslides. They're turning on tens of thousands of votes, not tens of millions of votes. And when policy changes now, after only a handful of people are saying, yeah, it's going to be this side this time, when policy changes now, it's changing rapidly and often in radically different directions. That produces uncertainty in people's lives. That produces anxiety in people's lives, and that makes politics feel bad no matter which side you're on. But the biggest implication of this partisan balance in the electorate is that our elections are stuck on the knife's edge, with each side either winning or almost winning every time. And that has implications for what parties do when they lose. Think about it. If you lose in a landslide, you go home and you say, wow, okay, people do not like what we're selling. We got to rethink this whole thing. You change. But if you lose in a photo finish, you go home and you say, we won last time. We almost won this time. We're going to get them next time. And you don't change a thing. And that's what gets us to stiff and rigid. That's why we're stuck here in this conversation about these person-based topics. Calcification makes the stakes of elections seem very high because the other side is farther away than ever on person-based issues where compromise is hard and victory is always within reach for both sides. 21st century politics feels different because it is different. But I don't want this to bring you down. I want it to motivate you. The role of higher education is never more important than when politics is stuck. When people can no longer imagine compromise, the university is one of the few places still designed to reward complexity. Now, as a college professor, I can't make politics feel better. But as administrators, alumni, friends of this great institution, together we can do something else. We can train people to live and thrive across difference, to engage across lines of identities and experiences, and to ask better questions about power and about fairness and about belonging. Because at this time, our time, defined by political calcification, you have to remember that curiosity is a form of commitment. And so is clarity. The clarity to remember what it is we are doing here. The clarity to remember that our classrooms, our libraries, our labs, our studios, these are not just places where we teach and students learn. These are places where we are building the intellectual muscle that we will need when politics shifts again. Because it will. It always does. It may take decades and decades, the way it did to shift us off of those New Deal issues. But America won't be stuck here forever. Now, you and I, we might not be here when it happens. But UCLA will be. This place will last. And when politics shifts again, we are going to need people who are ready. And those are our students. And we are going to need them to stand up and say, let there be light, and to ask, what kind of country comes next? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Vavrick. What an incredible way to end our symposium. Well, I hope you enjoyed our speakers, did you? And I hope you learned something along the way. It's part of what makes UCLA special. Our curiosity, our drive to discover, and our clarity that knowledge can help make the world brighter. But we're at the start of something new. And I feel lucky to be a part of it here with all of you and with everyone who's joining us beyond campus. Thank you to Chancellor Frank for this opportunity to bring us all together. We are truly grateful. Fiat Lux, thank you, and go Bruins. you.